Hey, what's up everyone? My name is Donovan. This is the Moto G6, and tonight I want to share with you my thoughts on this device after using it for the last 72 hours. So let's go ahead and get right to it. Alright, so first things first, let's go ahead and talk about the price of this device. So right now this is available at a few different retailers, including Best Buy, which is where I got it from. So it's available for $200 if you get it activated today. Now, when you do that, it's going to require that you actually activate it right on Verizon's network. So if you're not on Verizon, this will not work for you, this option. However, you can get it available for $250. So that's the regular price if you do not get it activated right away. Now, it is also available on Amazon.com for $15 less, so $235 is the price tag on Amazon. That one's going to come with some Amazon apps pre-built into it, but other than that, it is basically the same one. Now, one thing I will mention here is that this is an unlocked version of the phone, so it will work on all the major carriers in the US, so T-Mobile, AT&T, Verizon, and Sprint. I'm currently using it on Verizon. I've also tested it on T-Mobile, and it's worked great on both so far. Alright, so now let's go ahead and talk about the build quality of the Moto G6. So first thing you'll notice when you pick up the Moto G6 is, of course, the glass-on-glass design that it has this year. And so this is the first time that Moto has included in their G line a glass backing. So that is kind of a carryover from their Moto X4. Another thing that I really like is the fact that it has a Type-C cable finally. So this is the first phone in the G line with Type-C connection. We do also retain the headphone jack. So thumbs up to Motorola for not getting rid of the headphone jack there. On the right hand side we have our power button and volume rocker. On the top we just have our hybrid SIM tray. So this is a hybrid SIM where you can also put in a micro SD card. So the version I have comes with 32 gigs of onboard storage. The Plus version comes with 4 gigs of RAM, 64 gigs of storage. So this version has 3 gigs of RAM and 32 gigs of onboard storage, and we'll talk more about that in a little bit. On the left hand side there's nothing, but you'll notice that there is a pretty sizable camera hump here, and it's a little bit of a shocked face. At least that's what it looks like to me. We have our Motorola branding there on the back, and then on the front, let's go ahead and talk about this display. So let me get out of here and get back into my main screen. Alright, so on the front we have our fingerprint sensor. We also have a microphone down here on the bottom. So Motorola is one of the only companies I know of that still has a microphone actually built into the front of the panel. Normally they're on the bottom, but they don't have that here. It's right here on the front. And then on the top we have our speaker, also our earpiece. There's our camera right up there, and then we do also have a front-facing flash. So Motorola has kind of been a stalwart when it comes to keeping that front-facing flash as well. And then we have our 1080p 5.7-inch display here, and it is an LCD display, and I will say I really like how this one looks. It reminds me a little bit of this one right here. So this is an iPhone 8 Plus, and I think it's very similar in terms of the actual display. Of course, this one is a little bit more stretched out because it's 18:9 and it's 5.7 inches, but I will say in terms of feel in the hand, this phone feels really great. I like it a lot with this case I've been using. Whoops. And this is the Poetic Carbon. This one's available, I believe, for like 10 bucks. But the feel in the hand is really good. It's a nice one-handed, easy to use phone in my opinion. So thumbs up to Motorola on the build quality of the Moto G6. Alright, so now let's go ahead and talk about the performance on this device. So a couple things to keep in mind is that there are a few different variants of this device. So your performance may vary depending on which version you have. So I happen to have the US version that has 3 gigs of RAM, comes with a Snapdragon 450 processor, which, to be honest with you, was a pretty big letdown for me when I saw the initial specs, because last year's version actually came with the 625, the Snapdragon 625 processor, and that one, for me, was a little bit better of a performer, to be honest with you. So this one comes with the 450. It's a brand new processor from Snapdragon, or it's relatively new, but you can see the single core and multi-core scores here. So single core score of 736, this is a Geekbench scores, of course, and multi-core score of 3843. So if I compare that to like last year's Snapdragon 625, really that's a couple of years old for the processor, but that one scores closer to like 4,000, so it's a little bit better of a performer than what you get here with the Snapdragon 450. Now, with that being said, if you're an average phone user, I would say that really you're not going to have any issues with this device. It performs quite well. In general, day-to-day tasks, I've really had no issues. Social media runs just fine. Light gaming works great. No issues there. Netflix, YouTube, all that stuff's going to run just fine. The area that I find issues is with heavy-end gaming. Also, Snapchat, Snapchat's kind of a heavier app. That one has just kind of some slight hiccups in it. It's not a major issue because you can see that it performs quite well over here in Google. But yeah, so in general, it's going to perform very well for most people in day-to-day tasks, but with the heavier gaming, that's where you're going to see some frame rate drops and things like that. Now, to be fair, with the Snapdragon 625, it's not the smoothest gaming with games like PUBG and those heavier end games, but it's definitely more noticeable with the Snapdragon 450 here on the Moto G6. Alright, so now let's go ahead and talk about the battery life on the G6, and for that I'm just going to give you a quick snapshot of my day to day. So you can see here I'm at 3 hours of screen on time, and I'm currently at 27% battery life, and I will say that this is probably a little bit worse than my average day. Generally I'm getting about 5 hours of screen on time, so if you did the math here I probably wouldn't quite get that today, but in general about 5 hours of screen on time. For the most part I'm finishing most days with about 15 to 20% battery, so it is nice that they do include a turbocharger in the box, so that's great. Also, again, we have Type-C, so that's good as well. But when it comes to battery life, when compared to the Moto G5 Plus of last year, I'm definitely not getting the same kind of screen on time here on the Moto G6 as what I did with the G5 Plus from last year. There I was getting about 6 to 7 hours of screen on time. Here I'm pretty consistently getting right around 5 hours, so that's a little bit of a letdown. It's still not bad. 5 hours of screen on time isn't too bad, but of course 6 or 7 would be even better. Alright, so now let's go ahead and talk about these shocked face cameras here on the rear of the Moto G6. So we have a couple of cameras, as you can see here. So one is a 12 megapixel camera at f/1.8 aperture, and then we have a 5 megapixel camera at f/2.2 aperture. And what that's going to do is it's going to give you those portrait modes, and it's going to give you that depth effect that you have in your photos. So kind of like with my Motorola box, you can see how it's kind of blurred out, and the focus is all right here on the phone. That's the same thing you're going to get with photos here on the Moto G6 thanks to that dual camera. We do also have a flash here, and on the front we have an 8 megapixel camera with a front facing flash as well for those low light selfies. So when we go into the camera, a couple things to mention here is with video, we are only getting 1080p video both on the front and the rear, but you can see we do have stabilization built in. And one cool thing that I found with this device that I haven't seen on a whole lot of other devices is that you can actually go back and kind of post-add stabilization, so that's kind of cool, something I've never really seen in other phones. Maybe it's just me and I've never noticed it, but that's kind of a cool option. So when it comes to photos, let's just go ahead and go into the menu. So this is our menu option. So you can see we have portrait mode, and again that's going to blur out the background, and we'll take a look at some of the sample portrait mode photos. We have cutout, so you can cut out certain parts of the picture. We have spot color, so that's kind of cool because what it does is, let's say I'm taking a picture of this Motorola box you can see over here, it's actually going to take everything else and make it black and white, and it's going to make the Motorola box really stick out because of that bright green. We do also have panorama and then also a text scanner. We don't really want that right now, so I'm going to go out of it. Didn't mean to go into that. And then we have some face filters, so that's of course going to give you like cat ears or whatever. And then over here for video modes we have slow motion, time lapse, YouTube live, and then again your face filters. So kind of cool. The camera, one thing I want to mention here is this is really important, and that is the fact that the shutter speed on this phone is drastically improved over a lot of Motorola phones that I've had. So that's been kind of an issue with some Motorola phones recently, is the shutter speed, and that's absolutely not an issue here. So you can see that basically as soon as I take it, it shows up right here in our gallery. So that's great. Not so with some of the more recent Motorola phones like the Moto X4, the Moto G5S Plus, I believe is the other one that I had, where the shutter speed was quite slow, and that's not an issue here. So thumbs up for that, for Motorola for fixing that issue with the shutter speed. All right, so now let's go ahead and talk about a couple of things that are missing on the Moto G6. And again, this is the version I have, so no waterproofing on any of the versions of the Moto G6, whether that be the Play, the Plus, or the version I have here. So that's missing. Again, another thing that's missing with the Moto G6, and this is a little bit of a letdown because I feel like by 2018, even for a mid-range to budget-friendly phone, which is what I would call this is somewhere kind of in between there, and this phone does not have NFC. Now, if you get the European version of the phone, you do actually get it, but with the version I have in the US, there is no NFC. A little bit of a letdown, but other than that, this thing pretty much has all the other bells and whistles you'd expect in 2018. Alright, so now it's time for my conclusion on the Moto G6, and to be honest with you, it's a little bit nuanced. This is a great phone for average consumers. If you need a phone that just does well, then I think this phone will be great for you. It has good cameras, decently good performance, decent battery life, and there's really nothing about it that I would say is terrible. Honestly, it's actually a very good phone. Now, are there other phones at this price point that I could recommend maybe over this one? Yeah, I mean, especially if you live in an area where Xiaomi devices work well. I think Xiaomi devices you can get for a lot cheaper. So this is the S2, and this one's only available for I think $160. This one actually I think has better cameras, definitely better performance because it comes with a Snapdragon 625 processor. Apparently it's dead, but so this one gets better battery life, things like that. But if you don't, like, and let's say Xiaomi doesn't work for you, then I think this is a great device. It's right up there with the Mate SE from Huawei and other devices at this price point. So definitely check it out in the links down below. Thanks for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Peace.